During the pandemic, there was an elder that we visited with. His name is Max Defender, and he's from the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa or Ojibwe. And he had this dream, and in the dream, he was told what plant he needed to have around him to be safe from COVID. What he further explained was that he knew what he needed to do spiritually to help protect himself, and he also knew what he needed to do physically to protect himself. And spiritually, it was about the medicine from this particular plant, and physically, it was about getting a vaccine. And he supported vaccines because he believes in science, and he shared that our people were the original scientists. And the reason they were the original scientists was because our people studied the Creator and everything in creation.
The FGC has been instrumental throughout the COVID-19 pandemic response. We provided wraparound support to over 34,575 people, gave out 6,251 vaccines at our events, and distributed over 2,000 food boxes to the urban Native community before the emergency declaration ended. Doing this work means we need to have accurate demographic data.
Demographic data is variables collected at the individual level. It helps us to gather information about race, ethnicity, gender, and that information is important because it helps us to understand what are the needs of communities. In particular, it helps us to understand and identify disparities that may be impacting particular communities. And demographic data is important because it helps to address gaps in data ecosystems that are steeped in Western frameworks, where data for oppressed and marginalized populations is generally invisibilized or gathered in a particular way that makes it really difficult for us to make meaning of the needs of those communities.
A lot of the things that we were able to provide within our community just came from within our community, and so we're thankful to be able to have had the resources that we did have, but there were a lot of gaps in services where we could have had a lot more support where support was needed.
Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, municipalities relied on incomplete data to make decisions that impacted our communities.
We just want to be able to continue to help our community. We want to be able to get our community what they need and to be of service.
Having accurate, complete, and available information is imperative to making data-driven solutions. It is the responsibility of decision makers to build relationships with communities, to design data collection methods, build culturally specific analysis tools, and create community-based dissemination communication streams based on the communities that rely on them in emergency or crisis situations. For us, these are our stories.
These stories that we share are our data. We have always been storytellers, and our stories help to teach, they help to inform, they help to inspire. Our teachings help guide our behavior and how we are on this earth. And so when we look to stories as data, that also helps all of us determine, what our social determinants of health are.
We've always believed that our words are powerful, and that's a testament to our songs, our traditions, our oral history. All of these words are powerful, and they have meaning behind them. And so speaking in a positive light about these statistics is very important, as opposed to focusing on the negative impacts that they have.
Using a strengths-based perspective in understanding the wholeness of a community's story and the inherent protective factors helps us make better and more informed decisions around public health. This is why we share our stories with our future generations.
Indian people have always been storytellers, information collectors, mentors. These are how we grow as human beings and as communities and pass along those teachings to generations after us. And so we're very used to collecting information. We're very curious people. We want to know how to better serve ourselves and our communities and our families.
Disparities are important to be able to identify because that's where we can make meaning of the health impacts for our community, and we can place our efforts, funding, programs, solutions to address those disparities.
Data is not separate from us. It is a part of who we are and pieces of our stories, our ancestors, and our futures. Having Native people tell our own stories, be a part of the design, collection, analysis, and dissemination is part of data justice. It's part of data sovereignty, and it encompasses our Indigenous relational worldview of us being in relationship with the data.
We need to have accurate numbers of where our health disparities are, and being able to identify community members is really important for the medical community as well as for the general population, so that our numbers don't get lost, especially as people are living in, more and more of us are living in urban areas and not having the support that their tribal communities might be able to offer. Being in the city causes its own challenges in and of itself, and so we need to be able to have those resources available.
What we found out was that our public health systems were not prepared to meet the needs that we had in a time of urgency. And in particular, the data were not available to us. And so what we recognize is that we need to take action for justice. We need to create systems that drive data and the gathering of data through community-based leadership, community-based action, creating measures that meet the priorities that we have, that speak to the context of colonization and the histories that we've experienced, and creating data that really tell the full story of what we experience as Indigenous people every day.
Part of data justice is the unpacking of the concept of decolonization, inextricably linked to the relationship with land, time, and context. Decolonizing data means that only we, as Indigenous people, have the context to tell our own complete stories. It allows us to reclaim our traditional data practices and build a bridge between the systems that hold hostage the necessary survival supplies and our truths to impact our community health and wellness.
As a community health worker, it is very important that we have accurate data to be able to get our community the things that they need, culturally specific things especially, but even basic human needs, like toilet paper, diapers, even natural medicines that we use. And that's why it's important to share.
We need data to be able to tell the story of what's happening in our community. For example, if we are not counted, we're not able to access resources because perhaps the people who are funding resources think that we don't exist.
We had to do our own research because of the mistrust that we have due to our intergenerational trauma.
We wanted to understand what is the impact of COVID-19 on our population, on our communities. We needed to have a system that could be responsive to our needs in a time of great uncertainty, in a time of trauma that impacted every single person in the world.
Because of the relationships that we have with our community and our community members, we were able to collect the data that we needed to direct the funding in ways that we needed for our community.
Relationships are at the heart of accurate data collection and analysis. The more we decolonize how we approach data, the more we understand the context surrounding health outcomes. These are what we call the social determinants of health.
The social determinants of health is what surrounds us, what shapes us as we grow, as we learn, as we play, pray. It's factors at various levels. It could be access to healthcare, access to foods, access to education. But it's important to go beyond just thinking about access. Often folks say, build the space, build the facility, bring in the medical providers, and that is the solution for addressing health disparities. But in fact, it's important to think about the experiences we're having within those systems. If the cultural responsiveness and cultural rooted wisdom within healthcare, for example, is missing, then the experiences we may have as Indigenous people can be really harmful in those spaces.
Our community comes with countless generations of data woven into our baskets of intergenerational wisdom. Each new row showing us our resiliency, our connection to our own community, and the strengths we gain from laughing and healing together.
It's important to tell our own story because we know our story best, right? Like, no one else can tell our story for us. And I think that we all forget that we hold a very important piece of the puzzle.